Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'll call our recess work session back to order at this time for the Nash County Board of Commissioners. It's customary for us to begin our commission meetings with a prayer by a commissioner. And if you wish to join us in that prayer, you're welcome to. If you wish to use this time for a moment of silence, or if you wish to have your own prayer during this time, all are certainly acceptable. And at this time, I'll call on Commissioner Sue Leggett for the invocation.
If you'll join me, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for bringing us here together today. We are thankful for all of the blessings that you give us in this life. We ask for your presence here today as we conduct the business of Nash County. We also ask for your wisdom and grace. All of these things we ask in your holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I do consider this a work session, and I think they're leaving anyway. I don't know that we need the two ladies here with the sheriff's department. Everybody okay if they go? I told them before the meeting, as soon as we started, they're welcome to leave. Okay, we have just 3 items on the agenda for today. Primarily, it's a meeting to look at for the board the land development plan for Nash County. And Mr. Tyson, I'm sure, has spent quite a bit of time putting this together for us. The primary subject area that we're looking at is, as we all know, we have got quite a few requests of late about smaller zone lots in Nash County, primarily from something down to R20, and where there is water available or sewer available. And we've tabled something in our last meeting, which was the beginning of what could develop to be a very large area, but it was brought back to us the second time as a smaller section of that. But it primarily, I think, is something that since I've been a commissioner 17 years now, and some of the rest of you have been here quite a time, it's the beginning of what I anticipate the spread of Wake County over into the southern part of Nash County. Our land is considerably less expensive. I wouldn't say they're running out of land in Wake County, but certainly there's a lot going on in Wake County, has been for a long time. If you go to Johnson County, spend any time, I have quite a few relatives there and do go there quite a bit. You'll see that it also is not out of land, but a lot of land has been taken up for residential purposes. I think this is a big decision for the Board of Commissioners because it relates to a couple of things as it moves forward for the next 15, 17, 20 years. If this opportunity is indeed what we feel like it is, we are always interested in increasing our total assessed value, which enables us to keep a lower tax rate because our revenues will climb other than raising a rate on taxes. And also, we have all been working very diligently for about the last 10 years on a countywide water system or utility system in our enterprise fund. And it also has a lot of bearing on the profitability of that utility fund moving forward and how easy it'll be to continue those areas of the county that are less populated. It's been quite a challenge for us thus far, simply because we have a lot of rural areas, and Nash County, fortunately, due to its average household income, has not found obtaining grants for utilities or the water line system is not as easy as it could have been some years ago, and certainly not as easy as it is in areas that have a lower household income. Therefore, I think our decisions on this matter will certainly affect the utility fund moving forward and how fast we will be able to develop it into the rest of the county that we currently do not have public water available. It is our goal, and it has been for some time, to have, like some of our adjoining counties, Halifax and Edgecombe, a lot of Wilson, but to have a public water supply available to all citizens of our county. Fred and I had a conversation at lunch about rayon gas, which certainly affects wells and water systems, private individual systems in Nash County. So utilities development of a public water system in the whole county is certainly a item that this board should be very interested in. With that said, Mr. Lamb, did you want to say anything, or you want me to turn it over to Mr. Tyson?
I will reserve judgment until we hear from the experts.
Okay, Adam, seems like he's put you on the spot. If you're ready, we'll turn it over to you, sir.
I'm ready.
Any questions from board members at this time? All right.
The specific planning item that the chairman referred to that has been tabled is up on the screen in front of you here. That is General Rezoning Request Z190601. It was made by the property owner, and you'll recall presented primarily by the prospective developer Cecil T. Williams Jr. with the C.T. Williams Corporation. It's to rezone that 25 acres that is highlighted in red on the screen at 3645 Stony Hill Church Road from R40, which is the current zoning, to RA20, which is the proposed new zoning. The board voted back on July 8th to table that request and to specifically table it until your meeting on October the 7th. And the purpose for that delay was to create time for the staff to put together this presentation and to have this work session, because what we want to make sure is before you make a decision on this, we want to make sure that the two tools we have, the land development plan and unified development ordinance, are doing what you want them to be doing in terms of creating recommendations for you that come from the staff and the planning board. So this is an opportunity for us to pause in our decision on this item, and before we have it before us again on October 7th, to take a breath and just review how our tools work and make sure they're working the right way. We're not going to ask you to vote on any actual amendments today, mostly because that's going to take a public hearing. But if you look at the bottom of your agenda information sheet, there's a short schedule there that's the schedule for any proposed amendments. What we want is, what the staff would like is if today you could let us know what amendments you might want to see, then we would carry it through that schedule, August 29th to our technical review committee, September 16th to the planning board, and then we would have it on your agenda for your second meeting in September. That would allow us to make any changes we need to make prior to the October 7th meeting. So we're not changing the rules and making a decision on a rezoning case all at the same time. So I think that would be the ideal schedule.
If I could do one thing, I failed to introduce you.
I've got that on my...
You take it then, sir. Thank you.
I did want to recognize a few people here. Our special guest, Mr. Lenny Breedlove in the green shirt right here. He's representing our planning board. Mr. Breedlove's been a member of the board for 7 years. He served as our chairman for the last 4 years. He's also a real estate appraiser with Triangle East Appraisals in Rocky Mount. So he's here not only on behalf of the planning board, but to share his expertise and wisdom about residential growth and development that he's accumulated in his career. So he can serve us in 2 different ways today. I also asked Public Utilities Director Jonathan Boone to join us today because so many of our decisions about the land development plan pivot around the water system. And so he's here in case we have any utilities related questions. And then of course, Senior Planner Adam Culpepper from my staff is here to help us work the technology. So if you hear me ask Adam to do something, that's not me talking to myself. So I wanted that to be clear. I've got 4 topics of discussion for us to go through on your agenda sheet there. Number 1 was actually suggested by Commissioner Richardson, and it is a review of the fundamentals of how residential zoning works. So Adam, if you'll go to that table right there. And if you will pull out the long sheet that you have, that's the table with the colors on the right-hand side. And it may be helpful to you to pull out the second long sheet, which is a map of Nash County, primarily in the colors green and yellow there. This is a table of all our residential zoning districts. And it can easily become a confusing mix match of letters and numbers if you don't have a key to go by. And so along the left-hand side there, you have the zoning districts, A1, R40, etc. A description of them. A1, of course, is agricultural, and they get more dense as you go down. You have a low-density section, a medium-density section, and a high-density section. And of course, when I say they get more dense, the lots get smaller and the homes get closer together. So the minimum lot size is here in terms of square footage and then also in terms of acres. So you start out with a full acre. And the smallest that is allowed by our ordinance is 6,000 square feet. Of course, that would require sewer because you can't reliably plan on a septic system of 6,000 square feet. The next column are the typically allowed types of homes. Site-built homes, of course, are stick-built homes built on the property, modular, duplex, double-wide, single-wide, etc. On your map, if you notice where you have a green area and a yellow area, those are the two primary demarcations in the land development plan. The green is the rural growth area. That's toward the north for the most part. And then the bottom 2/3 basically is yellow suburban growth area. The main difference there is that the green is where agricultural land uses and rural lifestyles are actively being protected by encouraging larger lot sizes and more rural land uses. The yellow is primarily where in 2006, when the plan was adopted, public water was proposed to be extended. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You could have a water line in the rural area and have larger lot sizes, but if you're going to maximize your investment that you're making on those utility systems, the logical way to do that is to have your smaller lot sizes in the area where you have your water system. So that's the main difference between what is green and what is yellow, both on your chart and on your map. The green is the rural, larger lot size area, and the yellow is the more suburban area where we have extended water lines and where it is immediately adjacent to our existing towns. And so when we put together a recommendation for rezoning, the first two things we look at is the property located in the green rural growth area or the yellow suburban growth area. And then the last column of your table is the utility situation. So based on what utilities are available, that helps us narrow down for the developer which zones would be appropriate. So to go back to the item that we've tabled, that is currently zoned R40, low density residential. So they have 40,000 square feet or 9/10 of an acre, and the types of homes that they can build on it now are site-built, modular, and double-wide. But it's also located in the suburban growth area, and it has public water but not sewer. So if we put those two things together, suburban growth area is yellow, and the blue is public water or sewer, then that narrows it down to just two options that are supported by the plan. Now you can always maintain the status quo. So option one would be to deny the rezoning, leave it at 40,000 square feet. Just because the plan supports something doesn't mean you're mandated to do it. You can use your own discretion to decide when to follow the plan. But if we're going to follow the plan, it would break it down into two possibilities, RA20 and RA30. RA30 is low density residential, RA20 is medium density residential. They both allow site-built homes and modular homes, but they don't allow double wides or single wides. And so in doing that rezoning, you're removing the ability of the developer to have manufactured homes. Question?
I wanted to see if you could just clarify something for me. Under the recommended utilities column, only the RA30 and RA20 have public water or public sewer, and not even the larger lots have the or in there. Can you
Yeah,
explain that a
so
little
the top three that are white on the end are fine and recommended where you only have access to wells and on-site septic systems. The rest of them in the pink, you need to have both water and sewer available. And the RA30 and the RA20 are kind of a middle ground. And the reason that the plan is okay with having either public water or sewer is that they don't, main difference between them is that they don't allow double wides or duplexes. And so you're getting single family home development when you do that rezoning. But the blue is kind of a middle ground in there where you've tightly controlled the land uses. And so we're okay with that proliferating a little bit in areas where we only have one of the two. We're much more likely to have water than we are to have sewer. We have very limited sewer in the county.
Adam, I understand her question, and I have the same question. That certainly doesn't mean you can't have water and or sewer in those areas. It starts as a minimum on each one of these.
Right.
Therefore, you could have, when I first looked at it, I was wondering myself, but I see what.
Right. We're not recommending what utilities should be installed here. These are the recommended utilities you need to have before you get this zone, if that makes sense. This isn't driving the decision about where we're putting water and sewer. We just use whatever water and sewer we have to figure out what zone is appropriate.
And we do have R40 areas that have public water.
We do.
Right, for instance,
Yeah.
the area that we're starting
Yeah.
from right now. One thing we have not done is when we have the land development plan, we didn't wholesale reorganize the zoning map to match the land development plan. We use the land development plan as the criteria as requests come in. And so we haven't reshaped the zoning map to match the land development plan, but every time we get a rezoning, we try to use that as a stepping stone to get closer to the vision that's shown on the land development plan map.
Are you proposing from this workshop that we amend their development plan before anybody have a request for development of those particular areas?
Right, so ideally, if we're gonna change the plan, we would wanna do that before, so that it's on the record before we take action on a rezoning request, so yes. Now, whether we want to change the plan or not is part of what we want to discuss. We may leave this meeting deciding what we have is fine, but that's the purpose of the meeting, is to talk about what we have and decide if we want to change it. Any questions on that table and how we figure out which zones are appropriate when somebody asks us for a rezoning? And again, this goes into our recommendation. You're not bound by that plan, and you should never make a decision you think is unwise just to follow the plan, but the plan is a tool that we use to try to give some shape to our recommendations. Adam, if you'll go to the future land development plan map. So this is that second sheet that you have that I said might be helpful. It matches the yellow and the green that's in the table. And as I said, up here in the north and down here in this green stretch, that's where two things were happening. Nash County decided to take a stand to actively encourage rural lifestyles, large lot sizes, and protect agricultural lands. And then it was also where we were not proposing or forecasting that we were going to extend water lines. The yellow are the areas that were either immediately adjacent to an existing suburban town or city, or where we knew we wanted to propose water lines. So that was in 2006 when these boundary lines between the green and the yellow were drawn. Since that time, we have 13 more years of data of what we have actually done with the water system. And so now's an opportunity to decide, do we update the map to follow where we have put the water lines? If you'll notice the pink areas, there's three pink districts that have been established over the years. There's the large one in here, which is the Central Nash Water Sewer District. Then there is a potential future water sewer district on the western side of the county, the southwestern corner, that wraps around like a crescent right there. Then there is the Northern Nash Water Sewer District up here, where we're currently involved in the expansion. And what you'll notice is that not every area inside those districts was planned for water expansion at the time that the map was done in 2006. And so we have these artifacts. We have this stretch of green here, which is still labeled as rural growth area. And again, we have some areas inside that service district. Now, I believe that these water lines are phase one. And so although those water lines don't fill up that pink area, there will be additional areas within the pink that come with phase two, which is on the way. And so the other thing I want to call your attention to is we don't have a water sewer district for Castalia, for the water system that picks up at the end of Nashville system, goes up to Universal Leaf, and then goes into Castalia itself. But we have run lines that extend out to the east along these two roads. And so my question to you today about this map is this an opportunity, since we have extended water lines into these areas, or we've put them inside a service district, to update the map and convert this green rural growth area into a suburban growth area? The practical implication of that is when we get a rezoning in this area that is adjacent to one of these water lines, instead of only being able to recommend those top two lines on your table, the A1 1 acre or the R40 40,000 square foot lot, it opens up the possibility for the more dense development. Now keep in mind, the rezoning that has been tabled, this has no bearing on. That is in this area, it's already in the suburban growth area. It was identified early on, at least as far back as 2006, as being an area where we were going to expand water. So this is just an opportunity to update the map and to talk about that since we're having the work session. This does not immediately have a bearing on the rezoning that we're going to take back up because it's already in that suburban growth area. So the question is, do we want to expand the yellow here, inside the pink, and then along these two lines here? Or alternatively, do we want to leave it the way it is? And when we get a rezoning in those areas, the staff will be limited to recommending just very large lots, R40 or 1 acre A1 lots.
You want comments or
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that
Discussion?
from commissioners? Nope.
Well, looking at that map, the agricultural land is really dwindling. And especially in the southern part of the county, which I thought one time was more agricultural land there than up in the middle and northern Nash.
Well, keep in mind that this green is not where all the agricultural land is. This green is where we want to actively encourage large lots when we get a rezoning. There's plenty of agricultural land in this yellow area that the owners are not interested in rezoning to be denser residential developments. So it would be very misleading if you believed only the agricultural land's in the green. But this is where we want to make sure we have large lots is in the green to preserve that rural lifestyle. But there's agricultural land all throughout the county, so don't think that that's what that's representing.
Just for perspective, where is the airport
This purple,
actually located down
this
there?
purple industrial strip right there is the airport.
Okay.
And this purple right here is the county's economic development site at the intersection of 97 and just off of I-95 right there. So this water line here runs along Highway 97, so that's the airport. This is Winston Crossing where the new Dollar General is going up. And then this is the county's economic development site right there.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have sewage lines on here, right?
We don't, and part of that is because wherever the sewer lines are that we have are already encapsulated inside those pink areas. But it does run down 97 from the edge of Rocky Mount to that development site.
My thought on that, if there's no other comments, is,
Well, I had one, but you go ahead.
no, you go ahead, sir.
My first thought is, and you asked for comments,
Absolutely.
anything smaller than R40, low density, would be water and sewage requirement. That's my.
Anything smaller.
Anything smaller than R40 should be somewhere where they got public water, public sewage. I don't, everybody that had to have a lot from this point back, except some exceptions we made, that was probably not in my thinking, but, they had to have a R40 lot. And I just think you're asking for trouble doing R20s just because you got some water. The sewage in the house can be a problem. I know some of this land is the sandiest in the world, but it ain't all that way. You know, if you get a little farther up the road where I'm at, or where Ms. Lou's at, you ain't gonna get a R20 lot, because it ain't gonna perk that way. So why not be consistent all over?
Do you have anything that would tell on the map what the soil types are and what would be most conducive to a septic system versus a public system?
To tell you the truth, I've seen a map that looks like that, is so varied that to look at the county at one time would be very confusing. You would be hard pressed to pick out any patterns that you can see. Now keep in mind, when you rezone a piece of property, you are setting the minimum lot size. And before they can actually turn it into lots, those individual lots have to be tested for septic suitability. 15 years ago, you had to permit the first septic system. Since that time, you also have to permit a space on the lot for a backup repair system if your septic system goes bad. The state, until the last few years, had a mandatory requirement that you not go below R40 in this area, which is why we don't see a lot of lower or higher density rezoning. But with the advent of requiring that repair area up front on the front side, the state got much more comfortable with allowing smaller lots in that watershed area. And so you'll recall a couple months ago, we removed that from our ordinance because it had been allowed to expire at the state level several years ago. And so that's part of the reason that you don't see much R40 is that during the time that the state removed that requirement, we were still undergoing the effects of the Great Recession, and the development potential market had not come back. And so that's part of that reason. But to look at the soils, it's so widely varied, you wouldn't be able to pick out patterns by looking at the whole county. But the developer does have to verify the individual conditions for each lot. So if you rezone it for R30 and they go out there and the soil is only good enough that you can only get a septic system every 40,000 square feet, then that's what they have to do. You're just saying what is the minimum density you could live with if the soil will cooperate.
There's a map of Nash County. I was talking to Robbie about it. That classify all the soils in the county, including municipalities, which also include Rocky Mountain. And you can get a copy of that from the Soil Conservation Service. I have a copy there at home because I got it stored. I had to go and find it. But it classified the entire county soil type.
Well, that's very true. Dan, you were gonna say something else, go ahead first.
I was gonna say, I don't understand what the economic conditions and development potential had to do with them dropping that R40 requirement.
Oh, it
Because
did.
it shouldn't have nothing to do
It
with
did.
it. Cause it's all about soil and it's about neighborhoods.
Right. What I meant to say is that you haven't been faced with a bunch of residential rezonings in that area since they changed the rules, because the market is only now recovering. But the market conditions didn't influence that decision. This is a map that's in our current land development plan that divides the county into three soil categories, where there are slight restrictions on septic, where there are moderate restrictions, and where there are severe restrictions. The yellow color, which you can kind of see in here, very little flecks throughout here, is slight. The green is relatively good for septic systems, and the severe is the kind of pinkish color. And the main thing that stands out to me is that the severe traces the creeks and throughout the county. But other than that, there are good areas everywhere, and it's hard to draw a pattern based on that to me.
The other thing that's happened over the years is septic systems now are much more sophisticated than they were at one time. There are many ways to put in a septic system now, whereas used to, it was a gravity system only. You had to have good soils, and you buried lines X amount of feet deep. But now, this whole engineering science on a septic system and soil types has progressed so far that you can't use soil type maps to govern that anymore. You see low pressure systems, you see all kind of things between the old systems and systems now. Dan, to your comment, and you and I have this discussion frequently, and we're just not in the same place, but the county is full of maps, full of lots that are 100 by 200. It's all over the whole county. That was what happened for many, many, many years. I grew up on one myself on Halifax Road, and the house is still there, septic system still works. We had a recovery area, even though we weren't required to have one at that time. I think the biggest comfort level that we've done in the last years is the fact that up front now, you gotta have your septic system where to work, and then you gotta have a full recovery area should it fail in the future. We should really let, my thought is, the environmental health determine what lot size it needs to be, rather than us try to do it blanket all over the whole county, because we'd be destroying our, potential for residential development and economic development by just saying anywhere there's not 40,000 square feet, you gotta have sewer. I mean, that would be, you can't imagine what the detriment of that would be over the next years. The septic side needs to be taken care of by the soil scientists in the health department, not by zoning.
I hadn't thought about this, but you can go check it out, I didn't just make this up, but when me and you had these conversations, I never thought about the fact that the house I was raised in had 20,000 square feet too. However, and the septic tank lines right now is on somebody else's property. If we have to repair that drain field, we got a bad problem. They're on somebody else's property right now.
Right. Well,
We still own the house.
sure, that just shouldn't happen, but
that-
anything
well,
can
it
happen.
did.
Yeah.
Cause when that septic tank was put in, the septic tank line was done with a shovel, one line straight out yonder, across somebody else's field, nobody had a problem with it. But in today's world, if we decide to sell that house, we got a problem.
Well, Dan, I
And
can
I
just
just
tell you
think
that
it-
that won't happen again today.
Well, it won't happen again today,
As
but
much
what I'm
scrutiny
telling
as
you,
it is.
that, on that kind of land, there ain't nowhere to repair that septic tank field. It won't happen.
Right. Mr. Land?
And I know some more.
Yeah, I know we're talking about zoning and land development plan. And I think what we need to do is decide first, correct me if I'm wrong, is are we okay with the 2006 land development plan? Before we go to the zoning issues, it's your wish that we look at this land development plan to see if it needs to be
Do we want to change the
modified.
boundaries any right now?
Right,
We don't have to.
I know.
we
But
can't.
it hasn't been looked at in 13,
That's
14
right.
years. So I really think it's a two-step thing. We need to decide first if we want to change this or keep it like it is, make minor changes, major changes, and then look at the issues of zoning. So,
I agree with that,
Yeah.
because I've always said, it bothers me from a legal standpoint that we've got something in our land development code, and then we take action against the land development code. If indeed this board decides they want, as Mr. Combs said, all lots that don't have sewer to be 40,000 square feet, this thing's gotta be changed. Do we gonna stay in court and we're gonna lose every time we go? That's what I'm trying to avoid. Not that I'm agreeing with Mr. Combs, but that's the way we got to handle it, is to get this side of it straight.
I mean,
To me, this map is not in bad shape at all. I would like to see us tweak it a little bit to where utilities are, because I just have to know, because of what I do for a living, is if we're going to indeed at some point have water, public water in our whole county, which certainly have been a goal of mine ever since I've been on this board. And Ms. Lou, this should be important to you because most of that green is in your area. But if we're gonna do that, we got to, where we got more users, we gotta make sure we are doing everything we can to generate user contacts and utilities, because when we get up in this green area, it won't be profitable. We can't make it profitable. But if we got enough revenue from other areas, we can certainly put water in the whole county at some point in time. That's why I think the utility part of this decision is big, and of course, tax base is the other big thing. It just depends on where you want this county to be. If it's the whole county is like the area, the little town I live in, which is Dorchester, until it gets in about one more generation, they don't want another house endorse it. Therefore, they would be happy if they were green in the whole city limits. But Red Oak is completely opposite. I mean, right down the road, it's just what the elected officials think that are in charge, and that's the charge of this board, to decide what we want for the whole county as a whole.
We better be thinking about other things while we're thinking about development. You know, I thought Michael Eatman made a good point at the last hearing we had about this rezoning. If you put that kind of houses, you're gonna create more problems. You're gonna have some problems like Wake County's got, and do we want them? Do we want to worry about, we ain't got nowhere to put, the schools are full? Who's gonna police it? You know, if, and I'm not picking on the place out at Green Pond, but if you do that, and you have 600-700 people down there, you got a area 3/4 of a mile square that's got 600 some people in it, which is more than the town of Bailey. Where are you gonna send them to school at, and who's gonna police all that? One thing leads to another, and that's another thought I had. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you're not totally wrong.
Well,
Are we comfortable with basically small cities popping up throughout the county? In my opinion, if you put R20 or smaller, that is, out in the country, it's the equivalent of like a small town if you build the whole thing out.
Ms. Belfield?
I was just sitting here leaning toward as needed rather than going with a complete plan for the whole county. Varying from what we already have. Now, I can see tweaking this map here where there's water already close to it. But I would want to wait for the need to change. Changes on it.
What we're
And
really
I
talking
certainly-
about,
And I don't like an R20 at all.
we're really talking about land development code. Not
Yeah, I
zoning.
know, but,
Right.
we're looking at the map now, and that map shows indication of where the land development plan has led it to be.
If I could point out one thing, in the yellow suburban growth area, there is a wide range of conditions from immediately outside the city of Rocky Mount to down here to where we're talking about Green Pond. The land development plan already gives you the latitude where there's a water line to say whether you want 20,000 or 30,000. So without changing the plan, when you get a request up here outside Rocky Mount or between Nashville and Rocky Mount, if you were more comfortable with the RA20 there and more comfortable with the RA30 down here, we don't need to amend the plan. You just need to make that decision at that time when the rezone.
Kind of what Mr. Belfield
Well, that's
said.
what I'm
That's
talking
right.
about.
And so for the rezoning that's coming back in October, it's down here. The board would be well within its rights, without changing the plan at all, to say the applicant wants RA20. We feel like he can have it a little denser than what he has at 40. Let's take the middle ground, which is RA30. That's on the table, without having to change the plan.
Yeah, and that's what I prefer, the middle ground.
We're supposed to update our land use plan or land development plan every 5 years.
I think 10, a
Every 10
decade is a
years.
more.
So we've done it since '06, but we didn't
No.
change the map.
We haven't done it since '06 because development dropped off so far in '08 that the projected conditions we were looking to hit, we never outran what the plan was looking at. So we're about 3 years over, but there were several years where we had almost no residential development. So we're still within the range of what the plan was looking at.
Okay.
Adam, is that what you're asking us to do right now, or is that something that's more administrative type? Y'all would do more work on that?
Eventually, we'll do a wholesale new land use plan.
Okay.
That will probably involve us hiring an outside consultant that would hold some listening sessions with the community and with you. All I'm really trying to get at is before in the short term, if we continue to see more 20,000 square foot lot rezonings, is this plan working for you, or are there some changes we could make to make it work better in the short term? That's what we're looking at doing today.
Well, while we're doing this with your expertise, at what point with what you see going on, do we need to have this updated just because of the growth that's taking place? Or do we have 3 more years? Do we have 4 more years?
I don't know exactly.
It's not an exact science, I realize that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been, the plan, everything in the plan talks about a 10-year planning horizon.
Right.
So technically that ran out in 2016.
It did.
So it would not be a bad idea to do it. Having said that, I think when we do it, we're gonna find that not a lot of the determinations that went into the first plan have changed just because the recession set us back so far.
I don't think the map's in bad shape.
I don't
like it
either.
is.
I don't
I
either.
really don't.
The things that have happened since then is that our water plans have
Sure.
gone a little beyond where we thought they were.
Right.
And so this is an opportunity to catch that up if we want to.
I guess my question is, would you like for this board to give you a future date that we would like to have this plan revised?
Sure. That'd be
to
very
give you
helpful.
something to
But
work to.
I would keep in mind when you give us the date, that it's probably gonna be at least a 12-month process from when we hired a consultant to when the plan is complete.
I
and
was
on the
thinking
table.
more like 21 or something
Right,
like that.
that's what I was thinking too. But if you have
See.
some idea of a time range, that would help me and the manager, especially in the budgeting process.
But if we don't do that, we're gonna be sitting here in 3 years saying the same thing again.
Right, right.
But that's your decision, Mr. Lane.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to update the land development plan. Even if there are minor changes only, after 13 years, I realize there was a recession, but it's contemplated that you do it periodically, and so.
And also the composition of the board is different than what it was. We have different elected officials in some cases.
We do,
than
and
last
that
time.
changes how we feel.
That's right.
Do we, I mean, ever
Of
how
course,
it
the
goes.
last guy that had his district trained him very well.
Right.
Ever how it goes, shouldn't we, this zoning plan, shouldn't we get it like it's gonna be? I mean, you know, if we tweak these things, or we don't tweak them, or we let 20,000 square foot lots go anywhere in the county, you know, we should get it to where it's not a question. If it comes up from a developer, he knows in his area that he can develop 30,000 square foot lots, or 40,000, or 20,000, and that's it.
The closer
Can we
this
do
map
that?
matches what we do in reality, the better off from a legal standpoint we would be.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. We've done one in Wayne's area that he didn't like, we done one in my area that I didn't like, and I voted for his, and he voted for mine, and I just see it's frustrating. Let's fix it.
Well, it ain't broke, but it
Well,
needs
it's
some
broke.
tweaking. It needs some
It's broke.
tweaking.
It's broke when you got,
It's bent.
well, it's bent, it just ain't quite broke, but it's close.
The other thing that I would say is that number one, I would not want a plan that's so specific that it hems you in from being able to have some flexibility in certain cases. And the other thing I would say is, we probably need to realize there's not a right or a wrong answer. These are choices or preferences that the elected officials get to make.
But when it comes up, if you got flexibility to make a whole lot of choices, then sometimes it winds up being who it is or what it is, and it
Right.
shouldn't be that way.
The thing, Dan, is because of what I do and know this industry, that I hope this board keep in mind is the cost of development has risen so drastically that we don't need to restrict it to slow it down even more. That don't need to be the whole thing. I'm just saying 10 years ago, you could put 1 mile of street in with water and sewer. I'm gonna use the thing $300. Now we are approaching that being $700 to $800. So developers to be able to, and home builders to make it work, they've gotta have less frontage. To have less frontage, they got to have smaller lots. You can position yourself with your zoning in this land development code where you won't have any growth at all because you know, they just can't make their numbers work anymore. So there's a fine line in
Well,
there
that
we got to
depends
keep
on
in
how much,
mind.
a lot of times that depends on how much profit they want to make.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
I do understand profit's always in it, but they gotta be able to make a profit.
well,
yeah. But, yeah, you want everybody that's in business and developing to make a profit. But, sometimes, in some instances, they go too far. Too far, and I've seen it in the stuff they put up after 4 or 5 years.
Well, that's one reason that Adam and Z and I decided to invite Mr. Breelud to be here today, because I hope he's got some comments along that line of what it does to you from the assessed value and what things are worth. And I don't know when you intend with Lenny to speak.
That would be fine.
Lenny, do you have any comments you'd like to put in this? And understand, he's here because he is a certified appraiser that does this for a living. Plus, I wanted everybody on the board to make sure they knew who our chairman of the planning board is, and there he sits.
I work in 10 counties in North Carolina, 3 in Virginia, and the development cost has gone through the roof. I'm seeing lots in Franklin County that are half acre that they're paying $50,000 and $60,000 for to put a house on. If you restrict your zoning too much, you're gonna kill your growth. And yes, a 600 house subdivision outside of Bailey is gonna look like a small city, but if the people in Bailey plan it properly, it's gonna help the town of Bailey. You got more people that's
it's
gonna be.
5 miles from Bailey.
I know, but what I'm saying is, you're bringing people in. If you restrict it too much, Wake County's gotta go somewhere, and it's coming towards us. There are people now buying lots in the southern part of the county and building homes on them. You can't give away the world, but if you want growth, you've gotta be flexible. Part of the problem we have in our zoning is called a cluster. I don't like the cluster situation with our zoning, because each situation, R40, R30, you can go from R40 to R30 without having to come before anybody. It's in the ordinance. You can go from R30 to R20. I wanna see that provision taken out. I don't mind going from R40 to R30, or R30 to R20. I don't like going from R20 to R10 and giving the developer that kind of flexibility, because it can happen. You know, in a rural area, you can make a decision that 20,000 is the least amount of, is the least lot size you can have. So it keeps it from going down, even if you have water and sewer, to keep some of the rural integrity of the area. But remember, in all these subdivisions now, you have to lay aside so much land for the impermeable surfaces that go in there, to make sure you got the runoff right. It's just not, when you have 100 acres, that doesn't mean you're gonna develop 100 acres. You got some land you gotta put aside. And the development cost now, it used to be about, you could develop a piece of land and have lots at R20, your lot cost wouldn't be but $10,000. Today, your lot cost could be as high as $20,000, $25,000 for a lot. Am I right, Robbie? And when we talk about housing, you're talking about 1,200 and 1,300 foot homes. Those things are going for $150,000 now for 1,200, 1,300 foot homes. We don't have, and for a developer, we always talk about affordable housing. The cost to develop has gotten so high, it won't be long before you can't say there's any affordable housing. Because people don't make enough money, when you call it an affordable house, they're not gonna make enough money to afford a $175,000, $180,000 home, and a house is only 1,400, 1,500 square feet. So you gotta have some flexibility. How you do it is through the zoning, but don't be so restrictive that you tell a farmer that is out of farming, and we're seeing farms dry up, and it's because of tobacco contracts are being cut. If they're not making any money, what are they gonna do with all that land they have? And if it's in a prime location, you're telling a farmer, you can't develop your land, because right now, to develop a subdivision with R40 lots, you can't do it. You can't do it. It's not cost effective. It's just not feasible. The days of the shallows, over off,
There's your Virginia and the schools.
with
Today-
5 and 6 acre lots, you're gonna have to charge $150,000 for those lots to make it feasible to take all that kind of land up. In Franklin County right now, there's a subdivision, it's called Chartree Farms. They're selling 10 acre lots for $90,000. And that's in order for them to be able to pay, to put the roads in and everything else that goes in with them. So like I'm saying, you've got to do something with the zoning where you don't restrict it. You can tighten it down so much that you don't have any growth.
To date, most of the people out of Wake County and Raleigh that come to southern Nash County buying lots are not looking, they're not buying land, or not looking lots, they're looking acreage. You know,
But what I'm-
and
but
I
what I'm
understand what you're saying,
you
but,
look
and that's
at
gonna
what-
change, and I
you
know
look at
that.
what they're- You look at what they're charging. Some of these developers are coming in buying land and they're gonna sit there and wait until it's time to develop it. But you go to Franklin County and see what's going on over there. It's just incredible. I go into a subdivision, house is 1,800 square feet, selling $275,000. And I'm sitting here scratching my head. And then when I go look and see that the developer, the builder that bought the lot pays $60 for the lot. That's before he puts the house on it. That's no profit in the lot. That's what he paid for the lot. Then he's got to put a well and septic tank on the lot.
Well, isn't that because it's close to the Research Triangle?
No, but
That-
this in
the
Franklin
price of
County,
those lots
this
that
in
high.
Franklin County is not that close to the research triangle.
Well,
It's up around the bund.
well,
It's
that,
up
if
around
it's
the
close
bund
to
area.
Raleigh, I consider that close to the triangle, Research.
But when you think about it, southern Nash County is not that far from Raleigh.
No, what, about 15,
You can be there
16
in 20
miles?
minutes. You can be there in 20
Something like
minutes.
that. But one concern that I have in making it easier for developers to develop and make more money is that they put substandard homes up there, and then they started coming down. You can see them after 5 or 6 years. They started coming down. And I just don't want to be a part of anything that's gonna cause something like that.
I'll give you an idea. Back in 2006 and 7, developers around here were paying $10,000 to $13,000 an acre for land and putting streets in and building houses on it. The last land that has sold around this area, in those same areas, have been going anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 an acre. That's all they can pay because of the cost of putting the roads in and getting everything ready. So the value of the land per acre has actually dropped from where it was years ago, because it wasn't all that expensive to develop 7 or 8 years ago, but it is now.
There you go, Mr. Tyson.
Well, there's two components to the land development plan. There's the map, which we can change or leave the same. And then there are the recommendations that come from this table right here. And so if you wanted to add more of these zones to where it would require both public water and sewer, that would be in the narrative part of the plan. So you have the map, and then you have the table, and essentially these two, these categories here are in the ordinance. You can have an R6 zoning district, but not have a recommendation for it in the plan, and it doesn't matter that it's in the ordinance because we're never going to do it. But what we want to focus on today are the recommendations down here. Is the map working for you? And are these recommendations as far as what you have to have for public utilities for each of these zones? Does this look right? Or do you want me to put an item on the agenda where you would vote to change it?
So are you asking about the chart, or are you asking about the map, or both?
We're asking about both.
Okay. I don't have a problem with your chart, just like it is. The map, I'd like to see us look at utility lines that are in the green area and visit
Have it
that.
keep pace with what the water system has done over the last 13 years.
Yeah, we may need to review that every 4 to 5 years. But That's really all I think we currently need to do.
Now, the piece, I know we're trying to talk about the land development plan and not talk about the ordinance, but they are so interrelated, it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Would now be a good time to talk about the cluster requirements?
I think definitely so, 'cause I hope that gives some commissioners some feeling
Right.
with where I think you're going with that, and I'm a little bit dangerous, but, hearing what Lenny said,
Yeah.
you may well be in tune with
Pull
it, I
that up.
don't know.
There's,
But yeah, I think cluster would be a good thing, 'cause that has come up several times on a couple of these zoning as something that we didn't want that ability to be there, is the cluster side of it.
If you look at the 8.5 by 11 sheet that is in this, this cluster development option at the top, this is an excerpt from the ordinance that contains the cluster requirements. The cluster requirements, often when we give you a rezoning, we say they want to rezone to, for instance, the one we're looking at, they want to rezone to RA20, but the ordinance says they can have 10,000 square foot lots. So if you're RA20, you can go down to 10,000 square foot lots where the requirements are R10, as long as you take all that extra lot area and instead of making additional lots, you make a shared common area. The easiest way to understand what that means is to see some examples. So if you would go to the Oak Level Crossing, we only have 2 examples of a developer using the cluster requirement that I'm aware of in Nash County. This is Oak Level Crossing out on Oak Level Road. This is Barnes Hill Church Road. There's a large wetlands area in there that could not be developed for septic systems and also couldn't be disturbed for home construction. And so the cluster development requirement, even though this is zoned R30, the developer was able to put enough area into this shared wetland area that his lots didn't have to extend down into it and be 30,000 square feet. They could just be 20,000 square feet. He didn't get more sheer lots than he would have gotten if you took the whole red area and divided by 30,000 square foot lots. But it gave him some flexibility in using the good parts and working around the quote bad parts in terms of the wetlands that you have to stay off of. So this is an example of where it gave them some flexibility. They were zoned R30, but they were able to do 20,000 square foot lots because they added enough extra, which would have ended up being backyards, into this shared common area. The only other example we have is Bent Ridge. Sure.
Go ahead, Dan.
These that are R20 lots, do they have just water? They got water and sewage.
I believe they have just water and septic systems.
Okay, so you
They
think
don't have sewer.
They don't
they
have
don't
sewer.
have sewer. So,
It's just water.
so
And the
now
other-
you got a R20 lot that's backed up against wetlands. You gonna have a repair field on all them lots?
Yes.
Got to.
A repair area, depending on when they were permitted, and I believe they're modern enough that they would have had the repair area
This whole
requirement.
development area would have had to have.
Yep. And also keep in mind, although he has the developer has the ability to go down to 20, some of these are 29,000, some of them are 25,000. Rezoning between R30 and R20 opens up a whole 10,000 square foot range. And so some of these are practically 30,000 square foot lots because they're 29,000 square feet. It just gave them enough flexibility that they could make it work with the design that they wanted.
I don't understand, and maybe that's, if you got a R30 lot, so according to this thing, you can come down to R20, but if you got a R20, you can come down to a 10,000 square foot lot.
That's right.
Without even coming.
Without,
applying.
And the
just
plan,
cause you're gonna leave some wetland back on, I don't think that leaves you enough land nowhere for a repair field for a septic tank to do that one. I don't understand why that one's even there.
and the planning board has the same concerns that you do. And so, Mr.
I
Breedlove's
think it would be
suggestion,
impossible, but the option is there if you can prove it.
Mr. Breedlove's suggestion in the past at our planning board meetings has been to draw a line through the table right here between R30 and R20. And we dropped the bottom of this table. So the cluster option is only available when you're going from an acre to 30,000 or 40 to 30 or 30 to 20. But once you get to a zoning category that has 20,000 square feet, you're a lock at that point and you don't have the opportunity to cluster down any further. It would leave some flexibility for these large lot acreages, which really is the only place we've ever seen it used in the R30. The second example I was going to show you is Bent Ridge, which is out on 97. It's zoned R30 and clustered to R20. But we could do a text amendment that would draw a line on this table and drop the bottom half so that there is no cluster option beyond that. We could also just repeal the whole cluster. But I think there is some value in it up here at the top. And down here at the bottom, it would never be used anyway. So the question is, where do you draw the line? And the planning board chairman feels like that's a reasonable place, and I agree with him. So that could be a text amendment that we could bring before you that would let you exercise more control. When you rezone something to R20, there's no backdoor way for them to get a 10,000 square foot lot without having to go through another rezoning. It would remove that flexibility for that end of the spectrum.
That makes a lot of sense.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I agree with that, because it's hard to do
They
it.
don't
Come
need
up
that.
with
I can't say you can't do it, but, because somebody had to figure out a way.
You
but-
still got a 10,000 square foot lot, just because you laid out 10 acres of land back out in the swamp don't help you one bit with a septic tank.
It don't. No.
I think I-
Well, is there any disagreement of board members to limit that at that point?
It would maintain the flexibility in the big lots.
Sir?
I wish we'd have done it a year ago.
Well, the good news is, nobody other than those two developments has even used the cluster option, so.
And we have taken it out on a case by case to give them,
If-
you know.
If it
what
was
you
a
wanted.
conditional use rezoning, we've had a condition on certain occasions that said you cannot use the cluster. That's right.
I think that's the case where we've had too much flexibility.
Well, this will be an easy way to rein it in a little bit.
Is there anybody that has any opposition, any board member to drawing that line where he said to eliminate the rest of it? Lenny, he spoke for you, is that what you feel?
You know, for the most part, you know, it may never be used, but, I won't call names, but there was a few developers that when they come before us, I cringe
I got you.
because I just don't trust.
Them.
I've been in it 35 years and there's some people I just don't trust.
That eliminate that concern.
Yeah.
That takes that out because there are some that would actually use that if it
Yeah.
was possible.
Since you and I are decent friends, I want to remind you there's a reporter in the room with a pen that's constantly moving over here.
That's fine, that's fine.
You back up your
There's
words.
three
I
reporters.
really got no issue.
There are reporters in the room with pens. I only see one moving with that comment.
I actually have seen 6,000 square foot, maybe 5,000 square foot cluster developments. You probably know, what is the heading, the place in Raleigh?
Anyhow, wrong.
Yeah, do you know how small those
I don't.
lots are?
I've done
But
some
it
work.
ain't
But
gonna
there's
on
water and
septic.
sewage. That's
Oh, I
water
know,
and
I know,
sewage.
I know, that's water and sewage, yeah.
Right.
Now Nashville here has got a subdivision that's got R4 lots.
4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
With water and sewage, yeah.
Warren's,
Which one is that?
Davis Farm off Aviation Drive. It's
Both
R4.
houses.
It's R4, but most of the lots are 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. But it is
Right tall houses that aren't lit.
Do what?
They're right tall houses that aren't.
50 and 60 foot lots.
Yep, okay.
I think we have some consensus that you would like us to bring a text amendment before you in September to shorten that table and take out some of that cluster flexibility.
I see.
So that's very
That has
clear.
That go to your planning board first?
It does. It'll go to the planning board first as a staff-initiated text amendment, and then we'll have a public hearing on it before this board for you to vote on.
I do think that'd be very good, because I do know some of the commissioners have been concerned when you go from R40 to R20, you're really going to cluster R10,
Right, or the possibility.
the
That's right.
possibility.
Right,
Without being able to get your hands on it again.
Right.
yep, without seeing it again. Okay,
Well, that is clear to me.
okay.
How about the map? What about the map?
Out about the map and the table, the land development plan recommendations. Do we feel better about that if we get rid of the cluster, or do we want to talk about that some more? I think I think
You got
I'm
to
hearing
feel
from you,
some
Mr.
better.
Chairman, that you do want to, you would like for us to consider changing those greens that are in the water sewer districts to suburban growth area. Is that right?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, is there any opposition to that, Dan, any opposition to that?
You mean the map?
It's
This
just the
map.
one item first.
Where you
It
have
is
the water lines
where we
here,
got green
where you have
at.
water lines there.
And where we got water running in the green to looking at putting some kind, okay, thank you, Linda, appreciate you being here. To looking at where those water lines in the green are to potentially turn it yellow along utility lines.
So essentially, it would be this strip right here.
Excuse me for being, what's that got to do with this right here?
So you see the column on there that is green and yellow?
Yeah,
So
So-
where the green, if you go back to the map,
I got you.
where the green is, if we get a rezoning in this area, even if it's directly on this water line, the plan is only gonna recommend those largest two lot sizes, an acre or 40,000 square feet. That would also be true along this water line right here, that's off the airport and down here in the green. By turning it yellow, you're not making a decision about the rezoning, but you're opening up the possibility for the plan to support going beyond that 40,000 or A1 when you get a rezoning in those two areas.
So all the rezonings from 40 to 20 that the board has done in the last few years have been in the yellow area.
Except one that's right here on this water line outside the airport. But the justification for doing that is that years ago, the board had done another R20 immediately adjacent, and so it was right beside it.
That's the one that was in Wayne's district.
But the other 40s to 20s have already been in the yellow area and have had access to water.
So really, the fact that it's in a green area doesn't restrict.
Doesn't restrict the board's ability, it restricts my ability to recommend it on the TRZ. The board, like I said at the beginning, the board doesn't have to follow the plan, but I want a plan that allows me to bring recommendations that 90% of the time you're in agreement with. And so that's why I'm asking you, do you want to tweak it?
Do you find the planning board generally following your recommendation, or do they go against it sometimes?
I find that they generally follow our recommendation, and that's because our recommendation goes hand in hand with the plan,
Right.
and they feel like the plan came from you, the board. So-
What I thought that would be your answer. So that leaves it in the commissioner's hand to not only go against staff, but to go against the planning board, which I'm always hesitant to see us do.
Right.
But sometimes we have done it.
But I feel like it's the role of the
Commissioner.
elected official to go against the plan that you yourself set, and not my role as the staff. Somebody needs to stand up for the plan, and that's my role. If you decide, I can give you justifications for why it would be reasonable to not go with the plan if it's appropriate, but that needs to be your call, I feel like.
But generally, doesn't a planning board member who spends his time at the meetings they go to and all, do we not rub them wrong a little bit when we rule against what they did?
I think so, sometimes. I think if you do it in a pattern.
I think you said it best earlier, Mr. Chairman, you said that plan was put together in '06.
Right.
And a good number of members of this board weren't even here in '06.
True.
So, you know, if we disagree with the plan,
Right.
it's not a plan that we approved initially.
Okay, John. Good
So
point.
just
Good
that, make that point.
Yep. Jonathan, to put you on the spot and just say you'd rather not, how important is the viability of our water system to add users, not do anything to prevent us from adding users when we can? I mean, you have been in them numbers, maybe you hadn't been there long enough to answer that question, and that's a fair answer. But
Well, I know until the rates were changed in July of 18, that both funds were struggling quite a bit. So, but the other side of that equation is, what is the board's pleasure as it relates to rates? You know, if we're not gonna have density.
The same as it is to tax rates, sir.
Okay, then yes, then density is more important in terms of having a higher cluster of customers on the infrastructure that we put in the ground.
Right.
If our goal is to keep rates where they are at now.
I really feel that, number one, our funding agencies expect us to have a rate number I've heard frequently is $45 a month or under. I know our customer base expects it to be under that. There are some rates in the county, in some municipalities that are considerably higher than that. But I think that's the max I would ever want to see our water rates is $45 a month. It's tough on a lot of our people, retired people, even at $45.
That's the uncomfortable part. We want the utility to be affordable.
Right.
Because it's a public service.
Right.
I mean, the customers will
It
be
is.
providing this to address needs in the county.
Mhm.
So we don't want to price people out.
Right, exactly.
But density is important.
I feel like if, being that our land use development plan has not been updated as it was intended, that we need to pursue that being updated. And that process includes public input. I think that is so critical, that this public input is sought in this process and any changes like this. Because it's them that has to live there.
This right here, to me, is not consistent anyway. You can have a R40, low density, private well septic tank, and then you can have a R40 or RA40, private well and septic tank, but it's in the yellow.
Well, the
you
reason,
could-
the difference there is that the difference between RA40 and R40 is that it does not allow mobile homes. And so the plan actively wanted to limit any expansion of more, but when, in 2006, manufactured homes were the big buzzword for this plan and limiting where they were gonna go. And so the real difference between the R40 and the RA40 is in the suburban growth area. You notice you need the same well and septic system, but it's all about whether or not manufactured homes are gonna be allowed in that zoning
You
district.
can have, but what is not consistent about it to me is you can have a site-built home, you can have a modular home or a double wide. And either one of them, you have 6, 7 folks in the house, you got the same water and sewage problem. That just don't look consistent to me. No matter what type of house it is, and I know you might have been trying to restrict the type of house, I mean, is that,
I'm just not quite keeping up with you, Dave.
Okay.
Could you say it again?
if you have, in one, you can have site-built, you can have modulars, and you can have a double wide.
Okay.
In the other one, you can have site-built and modulars, but you can't have a double wide. But as far as the land and I'm back to water and sewage is all I'm thinking about here, is you can have more people in a site-built house than you got in a double wide, and you got the same problems with the water and the sewage, with the well and the septic tank.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I don't think it does, but anyway. that's
No, I
just-
understand what you're saying now. I didn't start with, but I got it now.
Saying how many people live in that.
Well, certainly,
Yeah.
I mean, what you said is a fact.
That's right. That's what I think, but anyway.
But his answer was, the reason it's like that is for a whole different reason.
And well, evidently.
Well, it is.
Yeah, evidently.
At some
Okay.
point back there, somebody was trying to restrict where you could put double wides. That's the whole purpose of that delineation between R40 and RA40, is the only one I see. And it has something to do with a site plan on this recent thing we did.
Well, now that's the difference between general rezoning and conditional use rezoning.
You're right, yes, sir. Yep.
But I can tell you that the biggest level of anxiety back in 2006, when our current plan was written, was the proliferation of mobile homes and specifically single-wide mobile homes. And so a lot of these, and county seems to be rather settled about that over the last decade. That has not been the level of conflict that we've had since we made these changes. But a lot of the input that went into the plan we have now had to do with where we're gonna have single wides, where we're gonna have double wides, and where we're not gonna have either. And so that drove a lot of those discussions.
And then all of that, part of that play is a period, but a lot of that play is economics of tax base versus a family with 4 kids to educate. You're trying to keep that total assessed value as high as you can, so you got the money in tax revenue to do all the other things that go along with a family living in Nash County. think we were trying to decide on the water lines, whether the board was in agreement to look at the water lines in the green areas and potentially have some corridors along the water lines that would turn yellow. Is that properly said?
Right, well, up here in Castalia, I think a corridor is the right way to go, because we don't have a district. But my thought is, do you want, if we want to keep pace with the water lines, do we want to buffer these lines so that they look kind of like this? Or do we just want to say if it's inside one of these water sewer districts, we convert the whole thing to suburban growth area? It would be simpler.
Or whatever the board would agree to on that.
Right. And again, changing the map has no bearing, unless you're gonna change it drastically. It's not urgent that we do that in order to handle this rezoning that's coming in October, because that's not even in an area that we're talking about changing.
What don't we, how does the board feel? Do you want to do that now? Or do you want to let that fall under the idea when we look at the whole map in 18 months to 2 years from now, how long it takes to get it ready? I don't see it being urgent enough to why we couldn't do it when we look at the overall thing. What, Wayne, is that?
If you took everything, just as an example, down at the lower part of the map that's green, and you turned it to yellow with what we talked about with Mr. Breedlove, then we're still looking at R30 as the minimum. You could.
So if you turned this green to yellow,
Yeah.
first of all, the only time it would make a difference is if the land that's being looked at to rezone actually touches one of these water lines, because you have to have access to the water line first.
Correct.
But then it would recommend, if you have access to the water line, then you could have RA 30 or RA 20 at the discretion of the board. The plan would recommend both at your
I
discretion.
thought, based on what he said, we were cutting it off between.
That's the cluster.
Cluster.
So once you decide what is rezoned, the developer will no longer have the ability to take the lot smaller in his design. So when you set it at 30 or 20, that's what you're going to end up, well, when you set it at 20, that's what you're going to end up getting. There's no backdoor way for the developer to shift the lot lines
So
around.
what he said, 30 could take you to 20, that would be the minimum.
That's right. That would be the only case where you could use the cluster development.
I've got a question. The, over here on the right-hand column, it says recommended utilities. That's not required utilities.
That's right. So if the board got a rezoning, for instance, if you got a rezoning out here that was on the edge of the suburban growth and the rural growth, but they didn't have access to a water line, there's nothing that says that you can't rezone it to whatever you want to rezone it. But your recommendation that's gonna come from the staff needs to go along with that table unless we change the table.
And who would have to approve that change? The board or the plan?
To change the table?
No, for the rezoning request.
It would go through the planning board for recommendation, but ultimately it would come to you. And that's on either the zoning or the land development plan. Any change we make is gonna filter through the planning board for a recommendation, but ultimately land back on this board to make the decision.
So the TRC, I'm sorry,
Okay.
the TRC follows this,
Yes.
and then the planning board, this is advisory.
Planning board has a little more latitude,
And then the
if,
board of
depending on how they wanna
commissioners
take it,
have-
and then the commissioners have the ultimate latitude to either follow it or diverge from it as far as you'd like to.
Sue, to answer your question, we've never gone to a 20 where we didn't have water available. I don't know, have we ever been asked?
Not while I've been working on it.
But I don't think we'd ever do that anyway.
I think the question is, what does it take to change these recommended utilities? Like if you want to say, for instance, public water and public sewage in them two blue blocks.
In the two-
7 votes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Well,
You-
that's all I wanna know.
4 votes.
Yeah, you tell me you want me to put it on the agenda, we'll take it through the planning board for recommendation, then we put it before the 7 of you to, and it takes 4 out of the 7 to do it.
Dan, that would be a detrimental thing for this county.
I don't, explain that.
Because it takes all your options away from the developer, it makes him have to have either a 40 or a 30, no matter how good his soil was, no matter how many septic tanks he could put 20,000 square feet. It just takes all the options and science out of development, and it gives us a hard, fast rule that we've done by zoning, which generally isn't the proper way of controlling septic systems. But if the county elected officials want to stymie growth, that's a good way to do it.
I don't know that I agree with you 100% that it's gonna stop the growth. It
I
might
didn't
make
say
it look-
stop, I
it
said
might look-
stymie.
It might look different.
Yep.
It might look different.
Right. It's unfortunate that the area that we expect the growth to come from bumps a rural area before it gets to another, municipal area. But that's geography that Nash County has. It's gonna grow in a systematic manner. It's not gonna jump over and come over here. It's gonna start there and come this way. That's just the way it grows. Ideally, you want it to do, but that's the way it's gonna do anyway.
What percentage of our permits are double wide and, single wides, would you estimate?
I don't know that I have a handle on the numbers good enough to estimate. We still do good numbers.
Like
on some
less than
ones.
50?
I would just say reading the permit so faithfully like I do, probably 30-35%.
That's what I would say too.
We're doing real well in single-family home permits.
We are.
And a lot better recently than we've done for many years.
Many years. Yeah, I've got a chart I keep every year, and it's steady climbing. And then what you're speaking of would at least slow that climb tremendously if it didn't turn it back the other way. I don't know what it would do.
But back in 2006, there was great anxiety about the proliferation of mobile homes. And during the decade that I've worked here, it seems that that matter has been basically settled in the minds of the citizens. We don't get a lot
Yeah.
of arguments about where mobile homes can and can't go. Sometimes people are surprised to learn what the rules are.
Right.
But overall, it seems that we've solved that problem for the most part.
Well, the better the economy is, the less of a problem that is anyway.
That's right.
Because it's all about affordable homes. And if you can't afford, as Lenny was speaking of, 1,300 square foot home and you got 2 or 3 children, you gotta go to another method to get somewhere to stay if you want to be an owner.
So that's a
then we
text
did-
amendment for the cluster option to be changed.
We got that done.
We'll do that.
And I think I'm fine, even though I sincerely hope we address it at some point with the utility system, looking at it when we look at the whole thing. Does that suit everybody, Wayne? Or do you want to go ahead and, you asked the question, made me think you may wish to go ahead and do it, which I'm fine with.
Well, no, I'm thinking, you know, you're over here at Wake County touching Nash County, and you're talking about the growth coming from Wake into Nash.
Right.
And I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in the growth down here in the green, where you're coming out of Rocky Mount down Highway 97
Right.
over to 95, and we've already got water and sewer
Right.
out to 95, but we got no growth because.
Good point.
Because we got no, we don't have the flexibility to put people on the system.
Well,
That's
on
a
the
big
sewer
problem.
system, on the
That's
sewer
exactly
system.
right. Well, and you've got the same thing with the water in some situations. Because I live off of West Mount Drive, and there's a big water line running right down West Mount Drive,
Right.
but there's no flexibility to hook on to that water line, so.
When this Rocky Mountain water line.
Well, that's exactly right, and so I'm seeing there's a lot of potential
Yeah.
down here out
Yeah.
to 95 and beyond.
Yeah.
But we cannot realize that because we don't have
Gotcha.
access to the water and sewer.
Do you have an interest in seeing that lower green go to yellow?
I think it's different down there in that area to 95 than it is far out in the county.
I agree with you
I don't,
100%.
I think it's probably, yeah,
Okay.
something that should be done.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can't speak for out here sitting in the middle of the county out, away from, that far out from a municipality. But I wish we had the relationship that we need to get access to that water and sewer, not only down 97, but in other areas in Westmount and otherwise where that water is available and the sewer, but we cannot get access to it.
Well, Mr. Boone brought us a long way in his short term. As we said earlier, elected officials are always changing, that
Yeah,
day may
well,
come.
and I
You got an
understand that.
election coming up.
Yep, you got an election coming
You know,
up.
it's everybody's looking to increase their
Yeah.
revenue, and, you know, you got people there that would be willing to tap on and use that system and pay that revenue, but you don't have a willingness to
And
to
certainly
let
they
that
need the
happen.
revenue.
Is that
Good
because
point
you're
there.
not in this, is that because they're not annexed into the city?
But I do think it's different down here to 95 than it is
I
up
agree
in,
with you 100%.
that's
And
just.
plus it's adjoining one of our prime areas for development, which is a reservoir area. It's
And
close to
particularly
that.
since we're gonna do the text amendment with the
Cluster.
cluster. That's always been my biggest problem, is the cluster.
Mr. Richardson, I sometimes call on you, but I'm looking at this map with what Wayne said. Majority of that green that's left is yours. I really would, we as board members should see how you feel about the green versus the yellow.
Well, I would love to see expanded too, but as you can see that the two water lines up there, we have water out there, but not sewer. Coming off of Cascade,
Well, you got sewer.
Right here.
right.
Right there, right
So
there,
the-
that's correct.
Right, the only areas up there we would be talking about would be a strip along these two water
Right.
lines, and then what's inside the Red Oak District.
But I would love to see that expanded too.
You would. You want to turn it all yellow?
Would love to, but hey, that's work in process.
Well,
Even if we did,
Be a good
it wouldn't have
incentive.
any practical implications
Right.
until the water system caught up to it, so.
exactly. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was wondering, what difference would it make, cause you still got to have a well and a
Right.
septic tank.
It wouldn't
When
make
you
any
don't have
difference
water.
because the recommendations wouldn't apply because you wouldn't, in those areas, because they wouldn't have
Would
water.
it make it look any more attractive for development if it was,
I think it would make it misleading if you turn that whole area yellow and said we had reserved it for suburban growth area, but then we turn back around and when you actually have a proposal, we say, but we don't have a water line,
We
so
can't give you any water.
we can't give you any water, so none of this, yeah, I think it would be misleading to turn that whole area yellow.
Well, so how often could you alter that thing? We run a water line down the street, would you go alter it every time?
I think in the future, there should be more coordination between the planning department and public utilities when we set up these districts and these lines.
Yep.
And ideally, we could be having this conversation when we are deciding where the lines are gonna go, instead of trying to play catch-up like we're doing now.
One thing I'd like to see done is to do away with that first minimum lot size, period. That goes to 40,000 feet.
The A1,
The 43,560.
yeah, that's the 1 full acre.
Yes.
Interestingly, the 2006 plan that was adopted by the board at that time, actually, at that time, it was 30,000 square feet in A1. And the plan that was adopted by the board, I wasn't part of the conversation, so I can't give you a lot of background, recommended that we go even larger to 50,000 square foot lots. And the board ultimately increased it from 30 to 1 acre, but that was the direction the board was going back then.
Right.
You're saying the A1 should be 40,000?
Yeah, just for simplicity.
Simplicity, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to develop 43,560 square foot in a lot. It's a lot simpler if it was all 40,000 feet.
Probably some
where
back-
does that come in at, that A1, if it's just if I got a farm and I decide I want to sell somebody a lot on that farm, I've got to have the whole acre, is that right?
That's
Yeah,
right. If
exactly
it's zoned
one acre
A1.
instead of
Will you go to the
40,000
zoning map?
You can't sell it for 200 by 200 lot.
This light green color which is a huge part of Nash County, is zoned A1. And so if you're gonna subdivide that property today, you need a full acre of land. Now, if you get a rezoning request into A1 that's along a water line, then we go to the plan to look at what we can rezone it to. But right now, and even if we increase the lot size in A1, there's some value in having a difference between A1 and R40, even if they have the same lot size, because single wides are allowed in the A1, they are not allowed in the R40. So that's the way we control for single
And
wide.
you
mobile
can just
homes.
leave that like it is.
Right,
I'm
just
saying,
change that minimum lot
Just
size.
change that 43 to 40.
How much a detriment do you think, in your opinion, it would be if you said a R20 lots had to have water and public sewage?
A sizable one. Because we don't have public sewer nowhere in the county about anything, nor will we ever
Well,
have.
but, in our area, Bailey, Middlesex, they can annex, well,
Not
Bailey
Middlesex.
can't, Bailey can't.
Oh,
'cause
Bailey
they ain't
That's
got
what
no-
I'm saying, I mean, Middlesex
Yeah.
has we got Middlesex is tied up with our industrial park, I hope, to an extent. Bailey's got none.
Well, they're working on it.
Well, that's good, but yeah, Dan, it would
If
be.
somebody's gonna
it would
develop
be
between
huge.
Bailey and Middlesex right now, I mean, it's happening, and they gonna have to have, I assume, acre lots.
If they don't change it from A1, they're gonna have to have an acre lot, yeah.
Well, 40,000
Cause it's in the green, okay.
in the darker green.
In the darker
Dark
green.
green.
You need an acre up
I got
here,
you.
40,000.
40,000.
Right.
Okay.
Then, no,
Which
you're
that's
right.
all right.
Yep. What would be, while we're talking about this whole thing, what would be wrong with changing the 43 to 40?
I don't think there's anything wrong. It's a preference of the board.
I got you.
It would make it, you'd have really, there's no difference to me between
It
a
really ain't no
43,
difference.
560 square foot lot and a 40,000
It
square
just
foot
makes
lot.
surveyors work hard.
That's right. That's right.
And it makes property owners get confused.
You would still have two different lists of land uses,
would.
but your lot size would be consistent.
Anybody opposed to that, Dan? Would go on taking the 43 to 40, just for simplicity? Any commissioner opposed to that? Primarily Mr. Combs.
43,000 square feet to 40.
Yes, sir.
43, 560 to 40.
Why was there a difference in the first place?
Well, when 2006, the minimum lot, when we adopted the last plan, the minimum lot size for that A1 was actually 30,000 square feet. And the board, through its process of studying the plan, decided they wanted the lot size bigger. And the plan recommended a 50,000 square foot lot size. But evidently, when we came back to actually amend the ordinance, the Board of Commissioners thought differently and took a middle path. And so 43, 560, or one net acre, was the middle of the line between the old 30,000 and the new recommended 50,000. But there's no right or wrong answer to that
No, that's
question.
true.
It's a preference for what the county wants.
It just make things a little bit simpler. It's no big deal. So we won't change that.
Well, we're talking about the cluster option, and we're gonna be in the vein of talking about lot sizes, so it might be a good time to do
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm thinking while we're looking at everything. Dan, does that bother you? You answered the question, yes.
I guess I'm all right with that.
It's just simplicity.
You don't understand. the
But you
result.
still, and we still got to realize, and I got to realize that 40,000 ain't gonna work if it don't perk.
That's
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
You
That's
got,
right.
you got to get bigger if that's what it
5
takes.
acres won't work if it don't burn.
Okay, so, and that's all right.
Yeah. I see no opposition to that, so put that on your list.
So that's two text amendments, one to tighten down the cluster, and one to decrease the minimum lot size minimally from 43, 560 to 40 in the A1. Any changes to the land development plan? We're gonna make the map changes, or you wanna look at that at a later date?
I think we have come to the agreement to leave the map alone until such time you look at the whole thing.
In a broader perspective.
In a broad perspective, is that not where we are? Ms. Lou, we kinda got off in your fault. Is there any other in your district Well, we pretty much decided where you got utilities,
Right.
so how we gonna do that? We gonna look at that for her now?
Go back to that.
And Wayne, you got to tell us what to do with that area that's in your district there.
So in Ms. Richardson's district, I really don't think it makes sense, except along those two water lines,
Right.
right? And I'm not sure where her district line is when you get over to the east, but we've identified these little green areas as being inside the edge of the northern Nash.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I would say let's buffer those two lines and let's bring this green in because it's immediately adjacent to Red Oak.
Right.
And
So
then
you're
the
gonna do
other,
away with the green in the
do away with the
Nash
green
water system.
in the northern Nash water
Water district.
system
You're gonna catch
along
them
those
lines.
two lines. And then the question is, do you want to do away with all this in the central Nash water sewer system?
Is that okay with you, Mr. Outlaw?
Well, you know, it's okay with me up to 95, that's outside of my district when you get to 95.
Okay?
So that would
So
probably
that would be from
be,
here over.
in Sue's district. But I'm fine with that. We're gonna do a public hearing on it anyway, so if anybody's got opposition to it, they'll speak up.
Sue, that's your district. You understand our question?
West of 95, south of 97, that is very rural area. That's farmland.
Okay. With water in it.
Mhm.
Do you want any of that to be yellow, you want it to stay green? You know, we're gonna change some areas, how do you feel about that area in your district?
You know, along where the line is, you know, I'm in favor of that, but, you know,
So-
we do need to protect the rural areas.
What if we went from 95 back to Rocky Mount? And then here we took an approach similar to what we've done in Castelia, where we don't wholesale do the whole area, but we put a buffer along
The corridor.
I'm
the
good with
corridor
that.
along the lines.
I'm good with that.
Whatever Ms. Leggett.
The only
agree
thing
with
I
you.
would ask is that from 95 back to Rocky Mount, that we pursue access to the water and the sewer.
Mhm.
And we are always pursuing it, but what do you got in mind?
I mean,
Good one.
aggressively pursue it. We've got, Mr. Boone, Mr. Davis, our chairman. We pursue a lot of things. That's something that's available. It would help that area grow.
Agree with
I
you.
mean, I've heard developers say, hey,
Right.
if we had water and sewer, we would go out there and we would build another Beth Eden.
Sure.
But you can't build a Beth Eden out in that area
Right.
without the water and the sewer. They just won't build it.
We've got the water, we just don't have the sewer.
You've got the population
You got a
that.
lot of water that you
You've
don't
got the
have access to.
population that is aging to the point where they like the Beth Eden type living.
Sure.
And there's none of that
They like
available
close
out in the
proximity
county.
of Been closer to the
In fact,
hospital.
I like it myself.
Mr. Boone, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm with you, Wayne, I know what you're asking, but you know the challenges.
You gotta have a target sheet or.
Yes, you have.
I know, and I understand the challenges, but it's
Yeah.
something that, you know, we're just letting lay there and we're just not aggressively pursuing it. And it just does not make any sense.
Yeah.
The revenue is there, it could help the city, the development could help the county. I mean, it's just a win-win.
Will you give us till, October the 15th to start?
That's my birthday, yes, sir. If you could do it by then, that'd be great.
I didn't say by then, I said to start working
Oh,
on
I thought you meant done. You
it. No,
meant-
I'm talking about to see what the players would be at that point.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
They're gonna probably say, all you gotta do then is.
That's a fair request.
Yeah, that's what
That's
it's all
the-
about. That's what,
the same
that's
thing
the
as you
whole
said about the
dispute.
store across from Sheets, if they would annex, they could have the beer and wine and alcohol, or they gonna tell you if you want
But I
the
mean,
water
you-
and sewer, annex.
That's,
Certainly,
that's
we
what their
gotta get to a
position
point
is.
where, you know, you realize that they need the revenue, the county needs the development. It's there if they're willing to do it. Because the developers will develop that area up to 95 or parts of it if they've got the utilities.
Well, as you know, we've tried that argument many times.
I know.
But we will continue to
We just
work on
don't-
it.
We gotta
And
change the
we're in a
city.
better situation than we have
I
been.
know we
Let
are.
Sue know that we can use.
If you live in the city, make sure you're
I keep
there.
bringing it up about every year.
Tell them if she knows about the sewer line, that it's open for commercial, but not
Right.
residential. We'll tell it later.
What other question we need to answer on this subject?
I think I've got a handle on what you want me to bring to you in September. My final question is, if we go back to the rezoning that's gonna come back in October.
Yes, sir.
The only change that we're making now that's gonna be relevant to that is you have the same three options you had last time. You can deny the rezoning, leave it the way it is. You can go to RA 30, or you can go to RA 20, which is what the applicant wants. And the only difference, if we adopt these amendments, will be that if you go to RA 20, you can do so with the confidence that it won't go further down using the cluster development.
Or 30.
I got a
30 can go to 20.
30 can go to 20, even as we're gonna amend it.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Combs?
I got a recommendation that I'd like to see put on the table and see what the other commissioners think about it. RA 20, the blue, says public water and public sewage, or public sewage. I'd like to see that read public water and public sewage, that's just where I'm at.
But keep 30 like it is, RA
Keep
30.
like it is.
Right. So we would turn this pink and change or to and, meaning that the plan would not support the 20,000 square foot lots unless you had both, public water and sewer.
Yes, sir.
And you don't have to decide on that today. If, with the chairman's permission, we can put that on the agenda and have a public hearing about it and decide then.
Can it come as a recommendation from the board if the majority of this board would go along with that?
You mean from the beginning?
I think you wanna hear from the public before you make a decision.
That'd be fine. Just bring it up.
Dan, I realize that's what you want in your district, but there's some of us that don't want that in our district.
Well, some might.
You can
They
do,
have to be on a case by case.
well, that's what you are
But
trying to say,
you
you
don't
can do
get
it on a case
consistent
by
that way.
case.
You don't get consistent when you do it case by case. And that's the problem we've already had.
Understood.
You're gonna have some things you can't come no lower, which is gonna make it more consistent than it
Right.
is now.
Yep.
But it's,
See, I don't have that problem with my constituents, so I
Well,
can.
you
it's
and
not-
Mr. Belfield don't have that issue anyway.
In freedom,
No, I
but we
don't,
feel for you
but
and
at the
Georgia.
same time, as I said earlier, I'm not gonna vote for anything that's gonna give these guys a legal time to actually, they have the freedom to go from 20 on down to 10 or 15 or 30
Right.
down to 20.
Well, we're gonna fix that. I
Yeah.
mean, all of us have
Well,
agreed to
that's-
fix that
No,
already.
the 30
I know
can
that-
still go to 20.
Well,
Cluster.
then I'm not in favor of that. 30 going to 20.
Well, that's a cluster matter.
So we're saying 20 can't go to 10 or less, but 30 can go to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And that was the planning board chairman's recommendation. We can draw that line wherever we want
Well,
it.
you still got to realize that these lots, the cost of them, and you just heard the planning board chairman say what it's costing. And these developers gonna do what they can to make a profit, regardless of what kind of zone it is. And, I've seen some situations where we got end up with some pretty poor construction. Cheaper material than they should have used. And-
Well, that's not the
and it's not-
developer, that's the home builder.
Yeah, well,
That's the person they got.
If Sometimes sometimes it's one and the same.
If they allow, you got the zone there where they can do it, they can do it and get away with it. And then the public will then come back on the board of commissioners for even having the zone that allow them to do it.
You got your orders?
So we're adding that one,
Which one?
the recommend, changing the or to an and for RA 20, public water sewer.
Well, that's a board decision. I certainly hate to see us do that, but that's a board decision.
I thought we were gonna have a hearing on it first.
But you can have a vote whether to put it on for public hearing, but not vote to do it or not.
Right, all we're deciding today is what you want me to place on your agenda in
I
September.
thought we had said it, when Dan said that, we were gonna put it on the agenda for the meeting.
So you're saying for RA 20, it would say public water and public sewer?
That's what Dan is
That's what I
suggesting.
said, yes, sir.
And that would be for the entire county?
So we would no longer make recommendations for 20,000 square foot lots unless you had access to
That's not gonna
both.
work. I'll give you an example. We just, if you go to the Oak Level Ruritan Club, behind that clubhouse, there's a lot of acreage that, and I voted for this because it was not a clustering effect, but there's
Took it
gonna
out.
be homes built behind there that would not be able to be built if you had to have the sewer. There's water, but no sewer.
That was rezoned from R30 to
Yes,
R20, right?
that's right.
So,
So that might work in some
But it
parts of the
might.
county,
Well, that's.
but it won't necessarily, what you're doing is you're talking about a change that affects the entire county. I mean, I just think you gotta look at these things on an individual basis. And if there's some reason that it shouldn't go below an R30, then, you know, that's a decision we can make as a board at that time, I believe.
Which is part of why the plan gives you latitude to make different decisions.
When you set a precedent, you cause a problem right then. You don't take but one time, you've set a precedent, and then you got this, yeah. Every time it comes up, well, you did it over there, why come you can't do it here? You know, and that's what you have to hear. And I was just trying to somehow or another just get it, so you don't have to.
But Dan, don't you understand that as you get in a more, non-rural area, that we want it different, and we want the ability to be able to develop that in an R20 fashion.
If we want to. Or, and now it's if we want to, or if we don't want to,
Or
depending
correct,
on.
yeah.
And it ain't consistent. you
Right.
know, And evidently, if y'all telling me that you can't get it consistent, then,
What you mean by that now?
well, if you, so I have one developer that comes up and he wants to do R20 lots, and he just got water. And it looks like a good situation, like maybe that one at Green Pond is, you know, they got good sandy soil and all that kind of stuff. Well, somebody comes up at Middlesex and they want to do the same thing, he can't do it.
Well, he can't do it if we vote against it, or he can if we vote for it, when he asks for the rezoning. You're wanting to take the flexibility out of the rezoning process with the utilities, and that's just not the best way to do it, because it's
Well, if
different.
there's a better way, tell me what it is.
There's not a better way. I mean, that's a surefire way to do it, but I certainly don't want that in my district up near Rocky Mountain.
Well, what you're doing, I consider it maybe a better way, is you look at each case individually.
Right.
And if there's some reason why you would do this one and not this one, for example, you may be looking at one now that you don't think it's reasonable to do that. It may be spot zoning, the soils may not be acceptable, or whatever it may be. But I mean, that's a case-by-case basis. But if you make that change that you're talking about, then closer into the municipalities, specifically Rocky Mountain, you take away that flexibility for growth if you add that option, that requirement. I mean, I think you do,
Well, you do. You take away that
and that's
R20
not really
flexibility.
good between Sharpsburg and Rocky Mountain to take away that option. I don't
And
think
it's not
it is.
good between Red Oak and Rocky Mountain either. Certainly not all over Red Oak.
when we take another look at the land development plan, would there possibly be a third zone where you would have more of like an urban growth area?
Transitional.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing also, is that the next time we do this land development plan, we need more than two main categories so that we can have some gradations in what we're recommending as we get further and further from the municipalities.
No utility, one utility, and both utilities.
Right.
Possibly. That's another way of looking at it.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of what I'm picking up on some of our conversation here.
Yep. The only thing that works against you is the fact of where the growth is coming from.
Mhm.
And it comes right dead in the most rural area of the county.
Right.
I mean,
It was a study that just came out, I'm looking at here, that takes into account growth, building permit growth, and Wake's number 2, Johnston's number 4, and Franklin's number 9.
Poor Franklin County, number 9, that's not bad, in the whole state.
Yeah,
And where's Nash?
It's-
It ain't on the study.
It only has the top 10. I'm gonna have to go do
But you're
further
talking about
research.
up there in Lou's area,
Mhm.
adjoining Franklin County.
Sure.
Some of that.
Oh, it's gonna come,
some-
it eventually will come
some
there.
adjustment, some
Yep.
flexibility
Yep.
is obviously gonna move into Nash County.
Yeah, that will help.
And I mean, they need it up there.
That they do need it up there terrible. They sure do. That's why it would be tough to do that countywide, Dave. You just gonna have to look at each case. I understand you don't like to have to make that decision each time.
And that was the biggest thing.
Right,
You
right,
had to
I
make
fully-
that
I fully
decision every
understand that.
time, and it ain't,
But they just, you know, we ran, and sometimes we just got to do what we said we're gonna do. But stymieing the whole county, I don't think it's the correct way to do it.
But if we have these, when we have these, requests come to us like this,
Mhm.
as you say it is, if you have some variations on their request or what they're asking for, and we say yes or no, but we can show them basically why we are saying it.
Mhm.
Not just say no and, or yes or whatever. And I can see where it's working because, like you said, there's different areas. You see, all of mine is rural.
Right.
And, so that would make me different to a certain degree, but I can see where it would be different and a little bit of change, but it would have to be a big difference, and you've gotta show them why we are saying yes or no, what the benefit or not benefits would be from it, so that's the way I look at it, so it's hard to say that you would just say no to everybody. Cause you know, it's just like I tell people out there to eat ice cream, everybody don't like the same flavor. So, whatever fits your,
Like
and as
it.
we were talking about, I was thinking about the home building right now, and I'm looking at all these different modular sizes, whatever. I'm seeing quite a few of those go up in my area. The double wides. You see, they'll go cut the timber off. A month later, you'll see, you go in that area, you will see 1 or 2 double wides sitting in there. So, there's quite a few, I call stick builds going up, but
Right.
we got quite a few of the double wides going up too, so. To me, it would be hard to just say one size fit all.
Right. Good.
okay, I was just trying to figure out some way to make it.
Understandable, but like you said, it's just kind of hard to say so.
Adam, what else you need?
I think I've got it. I'm gonna bring, 2 text amendments to the ordinance. That's to tighten up the cluster and to change the minimum lot size in A1 from 43,560 to just a standard 40,000. And then on the land development plan, we're gonna change the map to encompass all of this green and yellow to buffer these 2 lines. To change from 95 back to Rocky Mount to this yellow suburban growth area. And on this side of 95, we'll buffer the line similar to what we're gonna do up there. And we'll bring that to you as a land development plan map amendment.
Okay. Any other comments before we move to item 4? Like we're there. Basically, item 4 is yes, I answered my own question. I'll turn it over to you now then.
Do we need to go into closed session for it?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask, but it's not listed like that on my agenda.
Well, I think that's just my fault. I mean, it is a personnel item.
I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, or some of us probably need it. And I want you to tell me a little bit about what you're doing, because I think we'll be okay not in closed session, but
Okay.
I don't know how far you're carrying it.
Okay.
I don't think, are you revealing names? And for the benefit of the press, we're talking about a method by which we're gonna work through to identify our economic development director.
The candidates will be identified.
The candidates will be identified.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope so.
It would need to be in closed session then, in fairness to the candidates that we would have to, because I'm sure some of them are employed somewhere else. All right, so we will not be taking any action today, of course. You're just identifying candidates and you're gonna explain to us the process by which we're gonna work through to do it.
Well, I'm gonna have you help me
I
finish
understand.
developing the rest of the process.
Okay,
Yes.
I got that. So, yeah, it would have to be in closed session then, and then we have we will not take any action on that. Item 5 is an economic development, item also that we will be taking action on after that session, and what that action would be is to hopefully adopt or agree to a memorandum of understanding that Nash County would have with the Gateway Partnership for the time left that we are in the partnership, and then for the time that we would no longer be in the partnership. The Z and myself, as well as the Gateway Partnership, has worked on some items just so it won't be any confusion about who's doing what. And Mr. Belfoe, you know, it was discussed briefly at the partnership meeting last week. And that's what we will be adopting if the board agrees to it after we discuss it. So that will be an open session.
Could we not do that before they leave and then move our closed session item down?
Well, it's all closed session.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to
And
save
the
them.
action we would take would be to adopt the plan, at which time we could give you a copy of it. Because the partnership has already signed off on it. Correct?
Yeah, they signed off on it. They have signed the document. So they've given us a document. That doesn't mean we can't amend
Alter
it.
it, yeah. But if indeed we agree to it as written, we would be able to provide a copy of it to the press.
We would come out of closed session, vote on it, and then give it to the press, once we discuss it.
Any member of the press have any questions about what we're doing?
We're gonna discuss a contract matter in closed session, and if they approve it, then we will immediately come out of closed session. They'll vote to adopt it, and we'll give it to you.
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess.